welcome for the last session on this stage. We're going to have a very interesting conversation with a focus upon AI governance and analytics governance. I'm so honored to have three brilliant stars with me here on stage to talk about this topic. We'll try to keep it as dynamic as possible. And I think this is such a new field to see, okay, how can we see the full breadth of this topic, and building on a lot of the conversations that have happened on this stage and on other stages for the past 2 days. I would want to start us with giving you an opportunity each to introduce yourself and also give your high level, okay, what have made you come into this field of governance of AI and analytics? And we'll start with you, Meeri.
All right, thank you. Great to meet you, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Meeri Haataja. I'm CEO and founder of Saidot. We are 4.5 years old Finnish company, building platform for AI governance and transparency. SaaS platform, helping companies and enterprises deploy systematic governance across their AI portfolio. How I got into this space, I was in the financial sector before starting Saidot. My responsibility was to ramp up AI capabilities in the company, OP Financial Group. And also I got GDPR compliance program on my table. And you know, in a bank, financial sector, it's a pretty big thing. So I was personally in a situation to figure out how can we innovate with AI, with technology, in a way that is GDPR compliant, and then eventually start all these questions, ethical questions started to rise. So I got really passionate about that one and had the opportunity to somehow sort of pilot in the small context in that company. Is it possible to actually innovate responsibly? And I got super excited about that one. But also sort of recognized that we need to change the way how we build technology, because we are having such impacts that we typically don't recognize or focus enough. And yeah, it's been an amazing journey over the past 5 years in this area. A lot has changed.
Great, thank you. And we'll dig into your experiences from that throughout this talk. David.
Yes, hello everyone. DavidMagård. I work at the Swedish company's registration office. So a government entity in Sweden where we basically keep a register of the companies and provide trusted data to the ecosystem. I'm coming from a legal background, but I've been working in government for some 10 years and mostly with digitalization. And I think the governance questions, of course, come in quite naturally when you're coming from a legal background, of course. But what I think we've seen is that to actually make the solutions work and to have a trust for the solutions in the broader public, we need to be we need to really think through the processes and the governance levels, and we need to kind of have integrations in teams with the tech people who normally they have their set list how to do things, and then we integrate the business people or operations and the lawyers. And I've been basically working like that for many years, and I think it's very interesting and fun. So that's one of the reasons I'm there, of course. And then, of course, the great potential with AI, and to have that potential to really reach that, we need to ensure a high level of good governance and transparency to the system.
Great, thank you, and we'll come back to that. Anna, how did you end up what you're doing now?
I started 2016 with the research, and the research was multidisciplinary, and it was targeting the ability for organizations to control for ethical and legal breaches with AI. And anch.AI was founded in 2018, and we are a platform for governing AI responsibly. And the beauty with the platform is that we've assessed more than 250 use cases with a methodology that is an ethical AI risk assessment methodology, research-based. So we have a huge architecture and insight engine. So the importance here is to have the multidisciplinary perspective mirroring also in organizations, because that's the reason why we're here talking about responsible AI, is that AI has been developed in both organizational and academical silos. So the aim is to help organizations to have AI teams aligning their AI governance with compliance team and business teams. So with ChatGPT and the AI Act around the corner, it's not until now I sense that business leaders, non-tech decision makers, do want to understand the technology, and that's the reason for the platform, to be able to report and control for ethical and legal risks.
Great, thanks a lot. And why would you think that if we're talking big, kind of beyond the scope of technology, if we're thinking of responsible AI frameworks within enterprises, why is it crucial for enterprises to think in those terms? You were touching upon that topic of being cross-functional, but are there any other crucial reasons for why enterprises need to start thinking about having frameworks?
So I tend to compare this with cybersecurity 20, 25 years ago, when we just saw a threat. Like, we didn't know who in the organization was responsible and how to measure and report it. And the most urgent thing for organization is to have someone in the organization responsible for having right reporting metrics. Because only then you can control it. And the third thing is that it's data-driven. So times are over when you can run around with your checklist of questions or Excel sheets, going from the compliance team to the tech teams, because it needs to be, as the AI Act is proposing, it needs to be impact assessments and human in the loop in every stage of the AI life cycle. And tech teams are not ready. They don't know how to have a fairness model where you do trade-offs between accuracy and fairness. They don't know how to align that to discriminatory law, for example, or they don't know how to separate or choose the trade-off in different contexts where the solution is used.
Yeah, so it's as you're touching upon, it's being able to connect the different parts across an enterprise and its business processes to see that it becomes holistic and becomes a natural part of connecting across the whole value chain within an organization, both the technical parts, but connecting it all the way through meeting the customers or having the services that one reaches out. Taking the angle of bringing this, David, from an public sector context, where most agencies, municipalities, and regions will be in the forefront and needing to have these frameworks into place. Would you say that it is a natural part of building on the existing governance that are existing in agencies today, but taking it maybe one step further of integrating and focusing on the technical aspects also?
Yeah, and we're building on what's existing also, of course. I mean, we've been using different technologies for many years, so we have processes for those technologies already, for automation, for RPA and all of these things. I think for the public sector, we have a set of rules. It's already there. We don't kind of need new frameworks, I think, in that way. As I understand, of course, from the private sector, maybe they are not accustomed to that to some degree, or they need to kind of find a kind of soft law balance. For us, we highly regulated. We must do certain things. It's more of how do we do those things with AI, which is changing, of course, some structures. So one of the examples, of course, is how do the AI actually come to the conclusion or the solution or the proposal that we then are going to use in our decision making from the government sector. And we need to find, I think, a process there which is open, transparent, but also gives room for using AI, so that we don't block it. But we have most of the procedures already. We have the laws. We have in Sweden we have the basic principle of government, statlig värdegrund. All of these things exist. It's more of translating them into this, the use of AI and the new technology and the new landscape, basically.
To keep being relevant for its citizens going forward.
Yeah, keep doing what we're doing, basically, but better and more openly. I think also because a lot of people have questions when automated decision making is used, of course. So we need to be able to provide answers to that, and to do that, we of course need to have a good governance process that makes sure that we can provide answers in a correct way that is understandable, and it's also possible to audit.
Yeah, and it's interesting because here, explainability will become a key factor because it's reaching everyone. It's not just a selected, targeted customer group or segment of a sector. Meeri, you were on to the topic of your kind of being into the field of seeing how demands like GDPR impacts an organization. Do you see the same kind of effect of GDPR become a crucial with the demands of the EU AI Act coming to the organization of making it necessary for frameworks, or where do you see that it maybe creates other demands for frameworks within organizations?
Yeah. Whether we call it framework or policy, or there are a little bit different levels, but I see the opportunity and really a need, both in the public and private sectors, to establish that common way of working and common terminology and processes around these topics. One of the key challenges that we have come across is really related to knowledge and competencies in this area. When you face all the requirements and asks that we will see from the regulations as well, they can be really overwhelming. And these frameworks and policies, they really help making it concrete and more approachable for individuals developing and taking into use AI. So it's kind of a common language and common approach. But there are a lot of commonalities between privacy and this domain. We talk about privacy by design. Maybe these AI governance frameworks are a little bit similar. I also encourage a lot of customers that we are working with to actually tie your AI governance into some established ways of workings and governance. If you have a strong privacy organization and privacy ways of workings, that can be a very good ground for actually embedding AI governance related topics. If you have a strong compliance unit and compliance processes, that's a good base and ground for bringing these new requirements specific to AI.
Yeah, and I'll let you build on that, Anna, but I can recognize it myself while building the frameworks and ways of working globally for IKEA for the past year. That was one of the key aspects of success, is actually building on the existing strategies, existing guidelines, existing policies, building on what is really already working, rather to be infused and being a natural part of an organization's being, rather than trying to create a new species, which is really hard from a change management point of view, because then it's hard to really understand how that works.
Any transformation is like a huge job. It's difficult. So tying into something that exists, that's a wise strategy. Sorry,
Anna.
Yeah, I want to comment on the on how we relate the AI Act, the upcoming EU regulation on AI, to GDPR, because the AI Act will change the way we develop and implement AI from the core, with the human in the loop and the impact assessments that are totally new for AI engineers. And that requires data-driven approaches, and it requires a way of thinking that what seems to be slower in the beginning will, in the long term or medium term or today, be very fast going forward, because you don't, there's a lot of cost related to have to withdraw your AI solution if it's discriminating, and it's a lot of investments and reputations that are at stake. And then I also want to talk about the organization's urge and that could be twofold. That it could be to control for the risk, to be compliant with the upcoming AI Act, or it could be to strengthen trust to their internal and external stakeholders. Because by the end of the day, that we need trust from our consumers to opt in. I mean, in the financial sector, the bank that has the highest trust and communicates that this is how we treat your data in a fair manner will win in the long run. So I think regulation is always second best, and it might be that we tend to over-regulate at first, but then we will find our way to iterate. But the goal is for organizations to find that this is a business critical for us. It's a competitive edge, not driven by compliance or fear of sanctions.
Yeah, just checking a box. It's more than that, exactly. I wanted to build on something that you mentioned, Meeri, well, we're on a journey of needing to build our learning and training and competence within this field. What kind of skill sets or areas would you think that we would need to build on? Whether that is the field within technology or more social science or specifically around governance within this field, to be able to approach it in a way that we can apply it at scale?
The last 5 years, I've never worked in so interdisciplinary teams, and I think that's like a really something unique for this area. These questions that you basically cannot answer to those with your coming only from one specific field. So, and that's what it also makes what makes it also difficult, because no team unless you specifically build it around diversity and bringing different disciplines together has that diversity from this perspective. But the questions are, they are technical, they are legal, they are ethical. A lot of on how we shape societies and how humans behave, how humans and technology interact. So and that's probably what makes it difficult.
Yeah, it is, and I think we're going into. I think we've heard it across. Just the talk that we had prior to this one, we were talking about combining both having a human-centered approach, having a design thinking approach, but also bringing in the technical teams and working across those domains. David, the public sector is always challenged with kind of being in the wave after private sector in terms of a lot of progress, and also having a challenge to attract the skill sets and the competence necessary. Patrick Ekemo from your agency were talking yesterday about the dynamics of both having certain things built within the public sector to also take advantage of aspects outside of the public sector. Would you think that this also caters to the area of competence, to see, okay, how can the public sector both have the competence to build certain skill set internally, but also take into account to enable governance from external stakeholders?
Yeah, I think it's a must, because in the end we work for the citizen and the companies, right? So we need to understand their environment, what they want to achieve, and the best thing to do that is often to work together. And there are different forms to do that, of course, but I think it's essentially the same thing basically as having a multidisciplinary team. It's not only internal but also external.
Yeah, thanks. And Anna, what have you seen when meeting organizations where where you have been managed to have the right competence around the table, where it's been successful?
Very, very. I mean, we're talking about getting a head of legal compliance with a tech team, head of tech team, and the product owner in the same room. It could be on the same platform as well. There's a lot of things happening, just getting together and explaining the use case from a perspective that could be 3 different ways of looking at the world. So extremely valuable, and that's also how we build the platform. Now, what I want to say that I do experience a massive shift when it comes to generative AI and ChatGPT, because now suddenly there's a force from all employees that they wonder, can I use ChatGPT in my job? Is it moral correct? Can I trust it? So you have to be, or we encourage organizations to be proactive, to have principles that claims in that topic. For example, in large media or journalism, for example, that is crucial to have a definition of what's being generated by ChatGPT, what has been influenced of it, and what is not. And that also changed the values from how we experience value creation. Do we prefer the more reflectiveness view on the input we get from generative AI and ChatGPT, or can we replace journalists? And I believe we can't, because if you look at ChatGPT, it's an experience in very early days, and we have no ability to see what kind of data sets that has been used, and we have no ability to see how the generative AI is uncertain or less certain to the decision or the content it's made. So if you think about it, there's no way a generative AI, ChatGPT, can say, I don't know, because it's binary, you know.
No, and exactly. And I think we're going into kind of a phase where with generative AI that we need to have generative AI guardrails to be able to steer and govern it, even if we don't have every nitty-gritty details around the data or the specific around how the model works. How can we still find ways of governing it in a way that makes sense in its context?
Yeah, just to add on that, because I think it's on every CEO's mind on how can we use generative AI to be more efficient. And with that, there's actually just a way or an urge to do this responsibly, because the risks are out there. So the generative ChatGPT has kind of pushed this topic to CEO
Higher
level.
awareness, yeah.
And the more we use AI, the more we need ethical considerations on top in executive teams. And that's a good thing.
It is. And building on that, Meeri, like, if we're then put our spotlights on these leadership teams and the C-suite, what does it take? What is the responsibility on them to support this movement of supporting policy, supporting frameworks, to enable the organization to work cross-functionally, as we have touched upon, and to also apply the right technical enablement going forward? What responsibilities do they have, and what do they need to focus upon to move this journey forward?
I agree. It's a board-level question and discussion, actually, because that's where the priority comes from. And it's all about prioritization. We know this from any other previous transformations. Be a leader of any kind of transformation programs. If there isn't leadership support, the stakes are pretty low for success. I think it's not different from any kind of transformation projects. It's critical, but it's of course critical from that perspective that we have now not only internal dynamics, but there is so much happening outside the company and so many coming compliance. This is becoming compliance, not only a question if you are interested about these topics, and of course increasingly also about being able to serve customers. So it's essentially a business question. But I find it as one of the most critical questions and critical defining factors whether there is success in the company or a government organization, whether there is actually leadership support.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. And taking it from a public sector context, of course, we've seen that the EU, if we'll think upon in a European context, we've seen that policy engagement. We see the movement of the EU AI Act within this field, supporting the movement towards AI governance at scale. Yep. And what is your reflection? Do we see the same kind of engagement on a national level and other public sector context, whether that is Sweden or outside of Sweden? Where have you seen that? Are they kind of picking up the ball where the EU is kind of wanting to send it forward?
I would say it differs. I think that, and we can see this also in reports and indexes and such, that some countries are very much focusing. They are investing heavily and concentrating resources. I would say Finland is one of those countries to a great extent. Netherlands, Sweden not so much. Is my personal opinion. I do think that ChatGPT and all of these things are ensuring that AI is top of mind on many on the like political level, and we can see that now, of course, in newspapers. But from the Swedish side, we do not see any. We haven't had any great investments or really steering from the political level, I will say, on AI. Hopefully, that would change. But then again, as Sweden, the agencies, the government agencies, they are decentralized, delegated, with a lot of delegated powers. Lots is happening anyway. And of course, the budgets at the tax agency and all of these big ones, they do a lot already. So it's more of kind of getting the knowledge together and kind of creating, I think, some common infrastructures or common ecosystems that where we can work together easily, and also, of course, then involving the private sector.
Thank you. So coming back to the question of Anna, what have you seen of being the necessity and the criticality for leadership to support this movement, and where have you seen where kind of the examples of it going in being a positive impact, and where do you see that it could have been done in a better way?
Well, the organizations that would assign an accountable person is key, and also that accountable person having a data-driven platform to be able to cross-orchestrate this data-driven to report and to see that, as you said, you worked for IKEA previously, and how you can align this to your values, the IKEA values, and also how you can align it, in your case, to the statliga värdegrunden. So that's the success story, and then when you've done that, then you can go out and report and communicate to your external stakeholders in order to get the trust and the customers opt-in and engagements that you want. In the worst case, you would say, this is our ethical AI fairness principles, and you would just list them without having any support, data-driven support or methodology. You just say that you do it fair, and you leave it up to the tech team to use AI governance. And so the AI governance side, there's a lot of actors here. But the problem is that if you leave AI governance that is developed by AI engineers for AI engineers, and they use it, they cannot be understood by non-tech decision makers. So if you are a CEO or if you're a compliance team and you ask the tech team, do you have governance? And they would say, yes, we have our fairness models, explainability models, but they cannot be aligned with the context of the use case nor with regulations. So I think it's very important that you follow up, that you have a cross-functional, data-driven orchestration of this, so you truly can understand it. So that's where organizations do the mistakes, that they claim that they do fair AI without aligning it to
making it a
something to-
natural part of the organization. And I think one of the key aspects that we're touching upon here that I would want to kind of spin further on is that to make it understandable for those that are not within a technical field. And this comes to the area of how do an organization build trust? How does one actually make yourself understandable around AI to create trustful processes, whether that is in a business or in a public sector context? And how to build trust both for within a company, across your employees, but also to its external stakeholders. We've seen reports coming out that more and more people are wary of how does AI impact their lives. So we have seen reports coming out that are showing that there is a substantial business benefit of creating trust in AI within and outside an organization. On that topic, let's start with you, Meeri. How would you think are kind of some key enablers to support building trust by applying AI governance within an organization?
Yeah, you're right. This is before compliance. This is the number one sort of reason to organizations in both public and private sector. I think this is based on my experience. We've been working a lot in public sector, namely, and there this this driver is very, very important because citizen trust is everything, everything, and citizens and consumers, they have concerns related to these topics. I guess I have to bring up transparency as a means for supporting that, and I think we are in the Nordics. That's very sort of natural for us. Our societies are built. Our public sector is built on the principle of transparency. So I think we in the Nordics are where we should really build on this legacy and this sort of these values that we already have in our societies. But that's something that is from where we have a lot of good experiences already in this AI governance and domain space. I think, as an example, providing visibility into how you're actually using technology, also what are the risks and limitations, so that you are actually transparent about not trying to say that okay, there are no problems, that we know this all, but being honest about the limitations and challenges and the ways how you have tried to tackle that. That's something. From where we have good experiences, public sector, public AI registers is coming kind of a established best practice in this domain, and also the coming regulations are really encouraging for transparency. So I think it builds on having a shared common understanding about what are these technologies, how do they work, and what are the limitations. That allows anyone, whether it's user, whether it's affected person, whether it's third-party partner, to actually build on the same ground. So that's something that we can.
So we just need to be honest, right? Honest and transparent. And connecting this to a public sector context, David, would you think that aligns with, because already today there's a high demand according to the existing governance within public sector for transparency. For me, it is more a question of if that already acts as a canvas within the public sector assignment, what would you see are kind of the key enablers of supporting that, and is there anything else that can build trust from a public sector context?
I mean, in Sweden, almost everything is open. So from the government side, you can get most of the documentation out. So I think that's where kind of the compliance and the transparency comes in, because when people start asking, if we have an example from my city, it wasn't an AI but an automated system that with the list of the kids that start a new school, it said like, okay, this kid goes to this school and this kid goes to that school, and it was completely automated. And some parents were not so happy with the decisions that came, so they wanted out the code and wanted to understand why did this happen, how did it, what was the procedure, and the city couldn't provide that because some code were secret, but some they just didn't understand it, and they weren't sure of what actually happened to some degree. And I think that is a perfect example where you kind of damage trust, because you don't have a process that ensures a good level of understanding from the teams that are developing, from the ones who are using the services, and from the ones you have to explain the services to. You need to have a process there that ensures that you can provide information, you can make people understand what happened and why did it happen, and then of course give them the opportunity to say, okay, this is wrong, we want to do over or whatever. So building on the things that we already have, I think, as a canvas, as you say, is very good. I also kind of think from what we've seen in the AI applications or systems that are being used now in public sector, it's a key element. Of course, you have to have the leadership, you have to have the good technology team, the competence, all of these things. But you also kind of have to have a strategy of visibility, but also thinking of what will happen, because some AI systems basically effectivize a process 50% or something like that. Okay, 50%, so what would the people who have to do the 50% do now? And to kind of think that through a bit before you just implement a system. Because otherwise, again, you kind of damage the trust internally. If just someone says, like, here is an AI, now we don't need to do these things. And then it doesn't matter if the AI it's understandable. You have to also think of like the human context in this.
And the complete impact assessment of what would happen through its introduction and through its adoption.
Yep.
Anna, how to best...
Can I just comment, because
please,
that's so true what you just said. It's so true to get rid of the fear. It's not jobs that are going to be substituted, it's tasks, and we need to be higher up on the value chain and do on-the-job training and reskilling. That's so true. But I also want to, can I, or is it a different...
Please, build on that.
So I've sometimes experienced that there is like, within tech teams, without stepping on anyone's toes, because the tech team, sometimes they're on their own high of what AI can do. And that's also related to your comment here. What should AI do and in what context? Because then we can do the trade-off between explainability and precision. Like, we don't need always to use the really super complex neural networks if there's a rule-based application that can be explainable and do the job. But there's no one to blame here, because the technology has been galloping and they haven't really been open to the project owner, the business area owner, nor what the guardrails should be. Then it's just shifting the mindset and the KPIs for the one that develops. It's just, and this is doable. So I just think it's setting new goals and having new mindsets that can actually solve a lot of the problems.
Yeah, and you're touching upon a really important point here that I really want to kind of go further on, and it's the topic of how do we talk about AI governance not as a hindrance to delivering great AI, not as a hindrance of delivering great business fueled with business processes, organizational processes that are fueled by AI, but finding a good balance between delivering good efficiency and productivity while maintaining relevant kind of governance to safeguard both for compliance and ethical demands. To you, Meeri, then kind of building on that topic of discussion, what would you see is where Anna mentioned mindsets in terms of striking a good balance in between? Are there other things that organizations can approach this area of finding a good balance between the strong driver of efficiency and productivity that we do not want to hold back while keeping efficient governance into place.
Yeah. This is really interesting narrative, and I think it's part of the lobbying exercise towards or for or against the regulation. I think the time of that discussion is now gone because regulation will be there. So this kind of narrative that governance is against innovation or hindering innovation or stopping innovation, it can be now very harmful because we all know that this is about being in the business, actually building products that have an impact, and that's your job to actually take care of the impacts and make sure that it's safe to use. So from roughly where we are right now, I think this you need to listen to this kind of narratives very cautiously because it can be actually working against your competitiveness. Companies, government organizations who understand that this is essential, taking care of these aspects for being in this business, are actually they are readier for the coming world, and they are in a different competitive positioning compared to those who are still staying in that position that let's talk about hindering innovation. So this is something that I think it's super important. But then at the same time, another important point, it's not one size fits all. We need to understand that there are different risk levels, different risk levels mainly. So we shouldn't apply one set of governance rules for everything. And that is something that very early on in these governance programs and initiatives in companies, you need to find that way. How do we quickly, very early on in the process, identify that what is the right governance for this specific project, this domain, and then apply the right set of rules. Because it can easily go into over-governing if we take the most strict rules and apply that for everything. It's not a...
It is very contextual, and I think that's one of the things that often one can kind of come to think of, that it's one method to rule them all, or one regulation, or one standard, but one needs to see of the myriad of applications, contexts, sectors, and how it meets people in different contexts that makes the difference, and one needs to see it for how it impacts reality where it is. We're seeing that time flies by, and to be able to leave those that are listening with some really sharp and clear recommendations what enterprises should think of, the three things to get started with enabling the discussion and the journey of AI governance. I'll start with you, Anna. The three things they need to start with.
Education within the tech, compliance, and business teams. Reporting structures. Data-driven reporting structures. And then have the customer value as a guidance, we're not going to get sanctions. Because that creates alignment and power within the organization.
No, so thanks a lot. David, how should a public sector entity what are the three things that they need to get started with to start moving towards this area?
To get started with or get better at, I think, competence education. What Anna said, basically, that's the first one. Then you need to kind of think, consider your strategies and the governance structures that you do have, and see what might need to be changed due to the possibilities that you can have with AI and digitalization overall. And then you need to have some. You need to set out some decisions and be very clear on where those decisions are going to lead. I think so. So a kind of strategy how you would implement the governance structure, get the competence, and what you want to achieve with it in the long run.
Well, would you say that kind of setting up those decisions, would you say that they are connected to the kind of the idea of accountability? That setting clear accountability for moving the area forward, or how would you say that those decisions are
but also the
to?
things that we'll be discussing here, like how would this change our organization, and what decisions do you have to take to change the organization as we want to change it, and really be clear on that, and also kind of have the discussion within the organization that this is where we want to go, and these are the things that we need to do to get there. And also, of course, then kind of see what changes you need to do when it comes to how people work and what tasks they are doing today and how that would change. Because I don't think you can do it like a half measure, right? You need to really commit to it, because otherwise...
Decisive and active-oriented.
Yeah.
Thanks. And Meeri, 3 recommendations for enterprises or public sector organizations to kind of get on this journey of making this the norm.
I would start with ownership. So find the owner, right owner, preferably from where there are something related already existing, so that you don't need to build everything from scratch. Second, I would point that don't be afraid of boring things. Consistency is key, and do not do campaigns. Do boring things that are consistent across your everything that you do in this space. And then third, and this is important.
Can you explain that a bit more? Okay, what do you mean with boring things?
I mean doing governance on a consistent level across all your projects.
So standardization.
Because in this space there are a lot of campaigns. You can do fancy analysis of something and speak about it publicly, and then forget. So you have sort of done your part and been visible around this responsibility. So I think we are starting to separate organizations who actually do things consistently and face that okay, governance can be boring, but it's important. So look for that consistency.
Can we make it exciting also?
Of course, for us it's exciting, but hopefully for many of you as well. But then third, I think this is super important. Don't try to invent everything in your own house. So work with people who have been working, and a lot of things have been invented. So I see a lot of organizations who start from scratch and start to invent everything by themselves. So this area is going very fast, and these national standards, all these regulations, all technical means for solving these problems and so forth. So partner with people, companies, organizations who have done it and built on the existing knowledge and capabilities.
Thank you, Meeri. We're soon out of time, but I want to thank you all 3 to kind of being part of this discussion. Yes, we are knee deep into this, and I think it's a new topic for many. But to build on what you said, Meeri, is that many of the things that we're talking about are not new. Working with knowing what our data is, understanding our models, having the user in mind to have a good understanding how it impacts the organization, how it impacts society. That we keep track of, not waiting to get everyone involved towards the end when it's in production and running, but involving them at an early stage. Seeing too that we have clear governance across the organization, that we're ready for the demands that are coming from the outside world. All of these things we've seen in other fields. With the rise of AI becoming not only a technology that we see it's fully in its bloom here, but infused in business processes and organizational processes, it becomes more and more apparent that we can't treat it as something that is just part of a technical team, but it's infused and integrated as a natural part of each organization. And then it needs to play by the playbook of what is happening across organizations otherwise. It needs to follow the existing policy and ethical guidelines. It needs to follow the standards that we have in many other fields, but now it's becoming more explicit in the shape and form for the nature of AI. So many things can be built on, many things that can be connected to, and I think the major shift going forward will be to see it as the norm, that governing AI will be the norm of how we do business going forward. It will be a bit challenging to gear up the maturity to do so across data and algorithms, but we're in a good way to go to that space. Thanks a lot for your attention, and thank you all for the conversation.
Okay.